Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 54 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Haft. You can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. Mark, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. This is, opening day for the Phillies. Got all my Phillies stuff on, so I'm psyched about that. But this is my favorite draft activity. I love, I don't love doing mock drafts based on what I think is going to happen because that's so much of a guessing game of what other people are thinking and, who's falling, who's rising. And I will do mock drafts and we will do mock drafts based on what we think will happen. And I'll make some bets based on that and stuff like that. But my favorite thing to do is my big board and what I would do if I were these teams. So I get to play GM a bit for some of these teams. Me and Shane split up 16 picks each in the first round. So we're going to be drafting how we would draft if we were the GMs. We'll be making trades with ourselves, with each other. It'll be fun. This is one of my favorite activities to do. We've been grinding through the positional rankings. After we got through O-line last night, I needed a little thing. I need a little carrot to keep you going here.
Yeah, we have one position left. We've got cornerback left, and then we'll get into big board fights and all that. And we've got just a couple of weeks until the NFL draft. So we are doing a full first-round mock draft. Mark and I have split up the teams. We each have 16 picks. It's not as simple as odds and evens, though. We tried to give, for example, the Lions at pick 2 and 32. That's Mark's pick because we wanted him to make both picks for the same team. So there's not conflicting visions and process there. So this is going to be based on what we would do if I was sitting in the GM chair. What would I do for these teams? So, if you watched or listened to last night's podcast, we talked about some guys that are falling. They're probably not going to fall today because we value some of those guys pretty highly. But let's dive into it. And we're going to be using PFF's mock draft simulator, one of many mock draft simulators that's out there. You've got the Draft Network, PFN and PFF. We're using PFFs today because, as Mark pointed out, you can force trades. So if we want to make a trade, we ran into last year, sometimes the Draft Network would reject a trade that we wanted to do. So we're going to dive in. I have pick number 1. So I have the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 1 overall for the second year in a row. What do the Jags need? I think their biggest needs are offensive line and it's edge rusher. Now, they franchise tagged Cam Robinson, and so maybe they're not going to go offensive line, offensive tackle here. Maybe they should. You're building for the long term here. I do think that in their shoes, though, I would look at an edge rusher for this team. Just for the simple reason that you do have Cam Robinson already. You've got him locked up for another year. And edge rusher just makes more of an immediate impact. Because essentially your offensive line is as good as your weakest member. And so you need a solid offensive line across the board to really benefit from that. But on the defensive side of the ball, one elite edge rusher can change the game. And I think there are some elite edge rushers in this class. I think the edge rusher class is not as deep as the offensive tackle class is. And so at 33 in the second round, I think the Jags could get an offensive lineman, maybe a guy that can develop for a year and then jump in if they wanted to go that route. So the Jags at number 1 overall, they're going to select the guy that I talked about on last night's show. They're going to take Kayvon Thibodeaux, the edge rusher out of Oregon. And that puts Mark on the clock at number 2 with the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, I mean, there was 2 options for me with Detroit. Since you're at the top 2, you only have to make a top 2 here. And it was Thibodeaux and Hamilton. And I didn't really care who I got. So give me Kyle Hamilton. I think he's the best player on the board. I would have taken Thibodeaux if you went with Hamilton. But I think they're the 2 most talented players on the board. The Lions, they do need D-back help. They did take Jeff Okudah with the 3rd pick a couple of years ago. So I don't know if they want to take another top 3 pick on a cornerback or even a secondary guy in general. But taking a safety like Kyle Hamilton really revolutionizes your defense in general. So I think that's something that Detroit would 100% have to look into.
Dan Campbell would absolutely love Kyle Hamilton. Like, he would just mesh with Campbell's personality. It would be a great fit. And yeah, that's a great pick there for the Lions. And so the Texans are on the clock at number 3. And I love PFF is very honest here. Their needs, every position. Like the Texans are basically an expansion team right now. You can draft any player on this board, and it's going to be a good pick because they literally have nothing. And so for them, I'm going to look at offensive tackle, and I'm going to look at Evan Neal out of Alabama. Just a monster, a mountain of a man, 6'7". We talked about him last night. He was our offensive tackle #1, although I screwed up the graphic there. But he's going to give you a building block. I don't know if Davis Mills is your QB of the future. In fact, I kind of doubt he is, but I'm going to give him a top tier, the best offensive tackle in this class, and we'll figure the rest out as we go. And so the Texans, they're going to go Evan Neal, the tackle out of Alabama.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense there for the Texans. I got him at 13 in the mock we did I did the Texans, and I got I believe Hamilton at 3 and then Evan Neal at 13, which if that happened, I think Texans fans would be like going insane. But I got the Jets here, who they've got 2 picks coming up. So it's interesting. I've got a couple players that are pretty close here. I'm actually going to do something that I didn't think I'd do here. The top player on my board right now is Sauce Gardner, the cornerback Sauce Gardner, but there's no cornerbacks taken so far in this draft. And I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to get an end that I like at 10. So I'm going to go ahead and take Aiden Hutchinson here at 4, even if I do think Sauce Gardner is a better prospect.
All right. So the Giants are on the clock here at 5, and this is where the draft gets really interesting for me. The Giants have a lot of needs. They particularly have a lot of needs in the trenches. Now, it is the worst kept secret in the NFL that the Carolina Panthers need a quarterback. They want a quarterback. They want Kenny Pickett here. The Giants at 5 control a lot in this draft. Because if a team wants to come up, they can dangle that out there. Try to get Carolina to give them something to move up. Try to let somebody jump up and get Kenny Pickett. So if I'm the Giants, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm calling the New Orleans Saints, who made a move to get 2 picks in the first round. There's a lot of speculation that is to go get a quarterback. Now, I don't think the Saints view themselves as making a play for a quarterback here. I really think that they think they're a tackle and a wide receiver away from making a playoff run. And so I don't think the Saints would do that in real life. And sitting here as their GM, I certainly am not going to do that. But I do think it's an interesting break point in the draft. If a team wants to get up and get a quarterback, that's where it's going to look to happen, which would be fantastic for the Eagles if you get an arms race for a quarterback. However, go ahead.
I think you can make a case Atlanta should be picking up the phone here. I think you can make a case that Seattle should be picking up the phone here. Maybe even if you want to, you said the Saints, maybe even the Steelers, if they wanted to get really crazy and give up a future first to move up here. And I think that, I control a couple of those teams. So what would it take for Carolina to move up 1 pick?
For Carolina to move up 1 pick? No, throw an offer out there. What do you think is a fair offer for a team to move up 1 pick in a situation like that? I mean, you're probably not looking at a lot.
I was going to say third. Pick. I was going to say 3rd next year. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I think the Giants would prefer to make a bigger move than that, but at the end of the day, they would know that whoever they wanted, they can still get. And so I think they'd be happy to do a deal like that if Carolina wanted to move up and give them a 3rd next. It's just an extra piece, again, for next year when they may have to pull the trigger on a quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know if Seattle was willing to pull the trigger on giving up a 2nd, or I don't know if Pittsburgh's willing to give up a 1st, and those picks are obviously farther back to drop back for the Giants. So, yeah, if I'm Carolina, I'll give up a 3rd next year to move up a pick to get Kenny Pickett.
Okay, let me see if I know how to do that on here.
Yeah, no, It's okay.
I've never done one where I've run more than 1 team. Okay, so Carolina is going to give up 6, and at 2023 3rd.
I know they didn't have picks.
5th,
and then you got to force the trade.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And then
Okay. Carolina is now on the clock.
So Carolina's moving up because Matt Rule knows this is it. He knows this is his last chance. So when you started talking there about moving down, Matt Rule heard it all the way from Carolina, and he's like, "We need Kenny Pickett. We can't draft Malik Willis. We can't draft a prospect that that might have a really high upside." They have Pickett really, really low. They do. They haven't changed their quarterback rankings at all since the beginning of the process, which is interesting. But Kenny Pickett is a guy who I think is by far the most NFL-ready quarterback of the bunch to come in and play right away and to come in and save Matt Rule's job right away and to try to compete for the playoffs, which is what Matt Rule's going to have to do. So, or at least show growth with a young quarterback. So I think Carolina moves up here to take Kenny Pickett.
All right. Okay, so now the Giants are back on the clock, and we're right back where I said. You picked up a third rounder next year. That's great. You need an offensive tackle or offensive line in general, I guess. It wouldn't have to be a tackle. They could go with the best offensive lineman available. The only building block they really have is Andrew Thomas. They need an edge rusher. They can't rush the passer. And so the first pick I would make here, I'm going to make my offensive lineman number 2 in the class is going to be Akeem Ekwonu. He's going to go to the Giants. We talked about it last night. Ekwonu he's a great pass blocker. He's got some work that he can do as a run blocker, but he's a really good prospect. He's going to give them a pair of offensive tackles that are young that could potentially be cornerstones for this franchise. Now at 7, the Giants are in kind of a spot again where, and they would love it if they could create some sort of movement here between Seattle and Atlanta and maybe a team like the Steelers to come up and get a Malik Willis. You've got to imagine the Seahawks are looking at Malik Willis as a Russell Wilson-like guy. I'm not as sure if the Falcons are interested in a big quarterback play this year, but they might be. And so I could see a position where the Giants would try to trade back here again. So are the Seahawks interested in coming up to jump the Falcons here?
I think Atlanta and Seattle are going to stay pat. I think they're going to stay pat here at 8 and 9.
Okay. And then the only other option for them, if they want to generate another move, would be moving down to 20, which, again, they could do. They could continue to accumulate assets for next year, but I don't think they want to move that far.
No.
And I certainly don't want to move that far as them. So I'm going to stick at pick number 7. I'm going to take another guy that we talked about last night that should not be falling as far as he is. It's going to be edge George Karlaftis out of Purdue. And so he was my edge too when we did our rankings. And so basically with their top picks, they get my number 2 edge, they get my number 2 tackle, and they pick up a 3rd round pick for next year. And I hate myself now for picking that for the Giants.
Oh, that's a great pick. That's a great pick for the Giants. And it seemed like that was something that was possible earlier on in this process for them to get him at 5 or 7. It seems like that's way too high now for how high he's going. But he should absolutely be a top 7 to 10 pick, in my opinion. But this puts me in an interesting spot because I think that there's by far the best player on the board at the cornerback position with Ahmad Sauce Gardner.
Wait, you're Seattle. I'm Atlanta.
Oh,
I've got another pick here. Okay, so I'm Atlanta. So Atlanta, they've got needs really about everywhere too. They traded Matt Ryan for a 3rd round pick, which tells me I think they're in total rebuild mode now, which is where they should have been a year ago when they had a top 5 pick and they took a tight end, but we won't relitigate that. They signed Marcus Mariota to be their starter for 2022, and his top 3 wide receivers combined for 774 receiving yards last season. So it's just that it's terrible. So they really, really need a wide receiver. They could use an edge rusher. They could use a safety. There's not a safety here. They could use interior offensive line. They could use a lot of things. And I think they would love, if I'm Atlanta, I'm not taking a quarterback here, and I would love to try to get somebody to trade up to go get Malik Willis to leapfrog the Seahawks, which is who I think that they would probably be looking at. But I'm going to say nobody's coming up here. They would be willing to move back to 20, but I don't think Pittsburgh probably wants to come up that far.
No, New Orleans is probably in the draft that I did the other night. I moved back with New Orleans as Atlanta. New Orleans moved up to get Pickett, but I think Seattle and Pittsburgh are going to stay pat.
Yeah. So now they're kind of in a position that stinks, that their biggest need is a wide receiver. And it feels a little early to take a wide receiver, but also they're not going anywhere with man, I can't talk or think. They're
Marcus
not going
Mariota.
anywhere with Marcus Mariota this year anyways, so I don't think you force that need pick. I think you look at who the best guys available on the board are, and I think you scroll down to the guy that you mentioned earlier, and that's going to be Sauce Gardner. I think you look at it and you decide, take your pick between Gardner and Stingley, and I like Gardner better. I know you like Gardner better, and so I just want to get a building block. If I'm not going to compete this year, I don't want to force that needs pick. And so I'm going to go Sauce Gardner at pick 8 to the Falcons.
Yeah, that's an absolute steal. If Sauce falls all the way to 8, it's just the way it fell out here. But yeah, I mean, that's an absolute steal for Atlanta. Joe Chick is an Atlanta fan, so I wonder what he has to say here. It's ATL's on the phone. Somebody's coming up for Sauce. Sauce could be going to ATL, buddy. But Seattle would have definitely been interested in Sauce. But since he's not there, and there are other players at that position that I would definitely be interested in here for Seattle, but Seattle's got to take their quarterback. Seattle's got to go get Malik Willis, and Seattle's got to start this rebuild process because they're not just a plug and play of any position here. Now that they don't have Russell Wilson, they're not going to start Drew Lock or Geno Smith and try to win and get to the playoffs. So I think Malik Willis makes a ton of sense here to Seattle.
All right, and that puts you are also the Jets, so you're back on the clock at 10, having previously picked Aiden Hutchinson at 4.
So the Jets are going to look at the cornerback position, and they're not going to take the guy that everyone else would take here with Stingley. They're actually going to drop down and take Andrew Booth Jr., who's ranked in the 20s, I believe, on PFF. Yeah. Andrew Booth Jr., in my opinion, is a cleaner prospect than Derek Stingley, and you look at what he was able to do. He was also a 5-star prospect as well as Derek Stingley. They both have tremendous pedigree, but Booth doesn't have those 2 years of bad tape. The highs of Stingley are definitely higher than the highs of Booth, 100%. Like the best season of Stingley, freshman Stingley, is the best cornerback season that you could really evaluate as a prospect on one of the best teams of all time in 2019 LSU. But there's been a lot of injuries. There's been poor play. There's been a lot of things that have been concerning about Stingley in the last 2 years, and Booth just seems steady to me. There doesn't really seem to be any weaknesses to me with Andrew Booth. I don't get why he's falling in the draft. So his RAS is extremely high. I know he did suffer an injury at the combine, so he's not working out at his pro day. According to Ian Rappaport, he said it was not a long-term issue at all and not something that NFL teams were worried about. So if that's not the reason for the fall, I don't know what is. But if you walked away with Hutchinson and Booth, I think that's a pretty good. I think Robert Saleh would be happy.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I would take Stingley if I was there in that position, but I could definitely see them doing that.
That'll be interesting when we do I hope Dives is able to come on our cornerback show because we have Booth too, and I think you'll have Stingley too.
Yeah, I probably will. So up next is the Washington Commanders. The Commies are on the clock. I am trying for the life of me to figure out why PFF lists needs a center as a need for them when they have Chase Rouillet, who they graded with an 83.7 grade last year. Like Rouillet is one of the most underrated centers in the league. I don't know why it's listing that as a need for them.
And it's not listing cornerback, which is a big need for them.
Which is a huge need. So to me, their needs are inside linebacker because Jamin Davis was awful last year. Who saw that coming? Everybody. But Jamin Davis, we panned that pick on the draft show, called that bad pick, a massive reach. And he had a horrible rookie season. So you could look at an inside linebacker. It's too early for that. You could look at an offensive tackle here. Charles Cross is still on the board. I think he's going to be a really good player. But at the end of the day, Washington has a really good pass rush. And it did not show through last year because they did not have the cornerback play behind it. Mm-hmm. And so the Commies, they're going to take Derek Stingley out of LSU. There's concerns with Stingley. The 2019 tape on him as a true freshman, as an 18-year-old, is some of the most impressive cornerback tape you would ever watch. The technique, the way he understood things, just phenomenal. I don't know what happened the
People
last
thought he could
2
go
years.
first. People thought he could go first after that year.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but I know you don't play like that by accident as a freshman in the SEC practicing against Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Like, I'm not sure what's happened the last 2 years. I know there's injury issues and stuff. He's an elite athlete. He has elite tape from his true freshman year. Washington is banking on the upside with him, that they can get him. Sounds crazy to say, but they can get him back to playing at the level he was as a true freshman in the SEC.
So
and Minnesota's devastated right now.
Yeah.
That 3 corners are already off the board.
No, you're absolutely right. Minnesota would have been eyeing up a corner big time, but they've got a lot of needs, Minnesota. So I'm actually thinking about calling. Do you have any teams that want to make a move up? Because I have a team in mind for me, one of my teams that is interested in making a move up, but I'd be curious if you had anybody.
Let's see. Eagles aren't moving up. Saints aren't moving up because there's no quarterbacks.
Yeah.
New
Probably
England.
No reason for the Pats. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I don't think there's anybody on mine that'd be looking to move up right there.
All right. So the Chargers are going to get on the phone here with the Minnesota Vikings, and they're going to give up their second round pick to get up here to move up to 12.
Okay.
Or actually, they're going to give up their second. Let's do a little crazy. Pull up their.
I don't
trade.
think they don't. The Chargers don't have a second this year.
Yeah. They want to go all in on this year with the rookie QB scale. They got Mac. They got J.C. Jackson. They want to move up and they want to keep their second round pick. So let's maybe look into giving away a future pick here for the Chargers.
Okay, let me find them here. 17.
So yeah, let's give up that second next year, and let's give up a fourth this year.
123.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
The numbers get confusing after 64 with the compensatory picks.
Yeah, and you'll have to force it. But I think that they're going to move up because they have to protect Justin Herbert, and they have Rashawn Slater. That's a really good start. But Storm Norton is not a long-term option at tackle, so they've got to move up and they've got to get Charles Cross. Who there are concerns about Charles Cross, like we mentioned last night on our offensive line show, and primarily if you're a team that really wants to, zone running scheme or you want to really pound the rock, Charles Cross isn't the tackle for you. But that's not what the Chargers are. Their running back is Austin Eckler, whose his main use is really what he does in the passing game for Justin Herbert. So Charles Cross is going to have to pass block a lot, just like he did in college. So he will still have to get better at run blocking for sure. But Charles Cross is a perfect fit with the Chargers. Ever since I think I saw that in a mock a long time ago, and I was like, wow, that's just a perfect fit. So ever since then, I've had that fit kind of lodged in my head. I think it makes a ton of sense.
All right, and you are actually the next 2 picks. You're Houston and Baltimore, so
no, I believe
still up.
I believe you're Houston. Yeah, you're Houston.
Oh no, you're right. I was Houston.
I'm
That's
Baltimore.
Right.
You're Houston. Yeah.
Okay. Joe Ciccoletti says, "I love that trade up. If they stand, I've got them taking Penning, so getting Cross would be an incredible pickup." And that Chargers to the moon. Going to win the Super Bowl. Mark's got futures on it, but I was in on it before him because I said Justin Herbert was a god. So, who did I don't even remember what I took. Okay, we took Evan Neal at pick 3. For some reason, I had Houston in my head as yours.
I'll tell you what. There's a guy that's not ranked all that high here on PFF that's definitely going in the top 5 in the NFL draft. I'm not as high on him as I know Dibes is, but he's ranked 14th there.
Trayvon Walker.
People are gonna be upset if we have him fall any further, but you can do whatever you want. Obviously.
I'm not. I mean, I like Walker. He was my edge 5. Of course, that was pre-Ajabo injury.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have Jermaine Johnson, who's been a big riser that PFF hasn't gone along with. But yeah, I don't think he's not going to fall very far. He's definitely not going to fall this far, and he's not going to fall further because the Texans, again, they're an expansion team. If there's a team that can bet on athletic upside because they're not going to compete in the next 3 years anyways, it's them. I think Trey Walker makes a lot of sense here. They're going to pick up, an offensive tackle that is a known stud. They can be a little riskier with pick 13 here, and they're going to take Trey Walker out of Georgia. and they're going to try to teach him how to rush the passer with all his athleticism. So Trey Walker at 13 to the Texans.
The Baltimore Ravens, everyone has them taking an O lineman, a D lineman, a corner, and those seem to be the three positions. People seem to forget that Lamar Jackson has never played with an actually good wide receiver. So I'm still on that, on that mountain screaming to nobody about how Lamar Jackson needs a wide receiver to help him grow as a passer. Everyone just wants to criticize him as a passer and criticize him constantly. Who are the best receivers he's ever played with? It's Hollywood Brown. It's like a half a rookie season of Rashad Bateman. Willie Snead. Like it's not great. The list of receivers Lamar has played with is not great. So I'm going to take a home run swing. I'm not going to go with the obvious top options here. I'm actually going to go with wide receiver and go to my wide receiver one. Take Jameson Williams. I think his speed. If you get Jameson Williams and Lamar Jackson on the same offense speed-wise, it might be the fastest of all time. So just get those two guys in space and figure it out, Baltimore. I think Jameson Williams, I don't know if he's the perfect fit next to Hollywood Brown and next to Rashad Bateman. I think he actually does fit really nicely next to Bateman, but I'm not sure about Brown. But I think Jameson Williams would definitely help Lamar Jackson grow as a passer. And now we're at the main event here with the Eagles at 15 and 18.
Yeah, we are. So the Eagles sitting at 50, everybody knows their needs. They need edge rusher. They need defensive backs. They could use defensive tackle. They need a wide receiver. They need a linebacker. There's a lot of needs for this team. Not more so than other teams. We're just more familiar with them because we talk about them all the time. I think one need, it's not necessarily a need, but it's a position they are absolutely going to want to fill, is going to be defensive tackle. They love their trench picks. They love their defensive linemen. They have a 1-year deal with Fletcher Cox, who will be gone. And so I think they're going to be really interested in this defensive line class. Now, they would be interested in an edge rusher, but the top edge rushers are already off the board, kind of like we expect them to be. Of course, you've still got David Ajabo, but he's injured. He's probably going to miss most of his rookie season. You could take a swing on Jermaine Johnson, but I'm going to look at a guy, and Mark's not going to like it, who was my defensive tackle number one when we did the ranking, and that was before he tore up the combine, and that was Jordan Davis out of Georgia. The dude's just massive, 6'6", 340 pounds. He's just straight power, unbelievably strong. He generates push up the middle. He is not a good pass rusher. He doesn't pass rush at all, but he's got that size and power and run defense that you just can't teach. I think the Eagles, they want to do as much as they can to help the back end of their defense, and sometimes the best way you can help that is to steal a gap on the defensive line so you can keep an extra guy out of the box and in coverage. And I think Davis gives you the opportunity to do that. I think he gives you flexibility in what you can do moving forward with your defensive line with Milton Williams, who can maybe play edge some more. You can bring him along. It's a team that's not going to be a Super Bowl contender this year. So I like Jordan Davis, and the Eagles are taking him right there as he falls past the Ravens.
I don't hate it as much as some other options for sure. He would be 7th on my list for like my Eagles big board of what's available. So it's not like, McDuffie or something that I would really, or Petrie or something that I would really hate at this spot. So I get the Jordan Davis thing. He's a freak. How could you not understand why people are high on him? I think there are concerns that people are kind of overlooking with, can he play 3 downs? And, I would rather look elsewhere, but with how the board is broken out, there's no corners available of note to me. There's no edge rushers really besides Jermaine Johnson, who would be 6th on my list. I would look at linebacker and wide receiver, but both of the linebackers are still there, and there's 3 top-notch, or 4 for some people, 4 top-notch wide receivers still available. So I understand not taking one of them at 15.
Yeah, and that's what it looks at. I definitely want a receiver. Considering only one's off the board, though, I'm guaranteed to get one of those top 5 if I still wait on it. So now we go to the Saints, who are kind of in a similar position. I think they need a quarterback, but they don't think so. Like the Saints need a long-term solution at quarterback, but they're more focused on the short term. Joe Chick chiming in says the Eagles are running up to the stand to hand in that card after the pick from the Ravens. Davis, welcome to the Eagles. So I've got Joe on my side here. for maybe
think
the
most
first time.
people are.
For
I
maybe
think
the
most
first time
people
in the
are.
history of this podcast, because I'm usually taking shots at Kyle Shanahan and he doesn't like me. But the Saints are in a position where they need an offensive tackle to replace Terron Armstead, and they need a wide receiver. And so they could go either direction here. Now, there's a lot of wide receivers, but the Eagles are going to pick before them. So do they want to get their pick of a wide receiver, or do they want to go for an offensive tackle? I think they look at the board here and they know they're really the only team in this range that needs an offensive tackle. And so I think they would look to wide receivers here before they go offensive tackle. So we'll pull up the wide receiver list here. Now, obviously, you could go with a guy like Drake London. You still got Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Treylon Burks. Those are basically the big four guys that are here. They have Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas is coming off of an injury, and he didn't particularly seem to want to play for them last year. Now, maybe that's because of Sean Payton, something going on there. I don't know. But I think the wide receiver that they would really like out of this is a guy like Chris Olave, just a silky smooth route runner. He's got speed. I know a lot of people are really high on Garrett Wilson. I'm just not as big on him. Drake London was my wide receiver too. I think London is pretty similar to what they already have in Michael Thomas. So I think Olave makes a lot of sense for them. So that's going to be my pick at 16 for the New Orleans Saints. And that puts you on the clock at 17 with the Vikings.
It's a really hard decision, and it's like my top rated player is Devin Lloyd at this point, linebacker, and they need a linebacker, but they really need an edge rusher. They really, really need an edge rusher. Everson Griffin stepped away from football. No more Danielle Hunter. So they're going to take a shot on Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State. And, there's definite freakish athleticism here with Jermaine Johnson that kind of reminds you of Danielle Hunter in some ways. So I think Jermaine Johnson slides right in here to Minnesota's scheme.
Joe Chick asks, is there any chance Green Bay or the Chiefs trade up into this area knowing wide receivers are slipping a bit? I think
probably once a couple more go, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there'd be a possibility. The problem is I don't think the Eagles or the Saints would trade back because of the wide. Now, if the Saints were in front of the Eagles here, I think the Saints would, since they already got their wide receiver. But the Eagles need a wide receiver. I don't think they would trade back. And then you really don't get a lot of other teams. So I do think it's a potential either team will move up, especially the Packers having 22 and 28, Chiefs having 29 and 30. I do think that's something you could see happen. But I don't have those teams in this draft, so I guess that's up to Mark here.
Green Bay will be on the phone in a minute, I think.
Yeah, so the Eagles are up. They could look at taking an edge rusher. They could look at taking a defensive back. Trent McDuffie is still there, a guy that I think there's some concerns with his length to play outside corner. I think McDuffie can hang it outside corner. I think if he doesn't, I think he'd be a phenomenal safety, to be honest, since I'm just in the mood of changing guys' positions from our offensive line podcast last night. But all that aside, the Eagles need a wide receiver. The worst thing they can do is get to the end of this year and have doubts, have questions about Jalen Hurts and the surrounding cast and give him another year. So you got to make the final decision this year. You struck out on wide receiver in free agency and the trade market. They were willing to trade for these guys. It did not happen. I'm going for my wide receiver one, which is Treylon Burks out of Arkansas.
Country
boy.
He's
just, country boy. I think he has the most upside. His route running isn't particularly great right now. I think that can be coached up. I don't think you can coach his athletic traits, and he's so good with the ball in his hands that you can manufacture touches for him as that route running kind of comes along. I think he gives you a deep threat. I think you can work him out of the slot. I think you can do anything that you want with him, and you can throw him a jump ball too because he's huge. So Treylon Burks at 18 to the Eagles. And then the Saints are sitting here at 19. They're going offensive tackle here. And I'm going to go Trevor Penning, the tackle out of Iowa. Again, a guy that we talked about quite a bit last night, was a 0-star recruit, and he gained 100 pounds since he graduated high school. And he's, freak athlete, tremendous power. I think that's the guy that they would go after here. He's got a high football IQ, so he's going to make that transition pretty well. And so Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa, welcome to the Saints.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer right there. And now I'm going to talk about what Joe Chick was mentioning. And I'm actually, I'm, I think I have both the Chiefs and the Packers. I wish this is like a conflict of interest here. I think both teams really, really would want to move up here. So I'm gonna let's do the Packers. They're closer. The Steelers don't have to move back much. Let's pull up the Packers and the Steelers in the trade department here. So let's give up 22 and 59. What do you think? 53 or 59?
I think, honestly, I don't know if they would. You think they would get a second rounder out of that?
Well, I think KC, because of what I was just saying with KC.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Up too. Bidding war, yeah. I think 59 gets it done.
All right, let's do it.
Because you look at KC, they don't pick again until the end of the second round at 62.
Yeah.
So unless KC's giving up both firsts, they can't even come close to matching that. In fact, if I'm Pittsburgh, I would rather have 22 and 92 than to have like 29 and
60,
whatever 62.
Yeah.
So I think that's plenty.
Yeah, you'll have to force it. Yeah. It won't work. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird sometimes. There we go. So Green Bay's going to move up and run to the podium and take Drake London, because they desperately need a receiver. And Green Bay might not be done in the receiver department because they not only did they trade Devontae Adams, but they lost MVS, and they didn't really bring anyone in to replace either of them. So I think they have to draft 2 receivers in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I think they do as well. And it's a bad place to go into a draft, and everybody know that. But so the Patriots are on the clock now. They overpaid for Devontae Parker because they don't have wide receivers. This is a good wide receiver draft. There's wide receivers still here, but I think they've got a bigger need, to be honest. And I think that bigger need is at cornerback. They traded Stephon Gilmore last year. They let J.C. Jackson walk in free agency. They lost their top 3 linebackers to free agency. And so I think this is a defense pick. And I think it comes down to Devin Lloyd versus Trent McDuffie. But I'm going to go with Trent McDuffie here. I'm going to slot him into the Bill Belichick defense and see if he can pick up some of the slack that's going to be after J.C. Jackson left. And that puts you back up with the Steelers.
And the Steelers are getting
potentially trade down with the Chiefs.
Yep, that's exactly what they're going to do. The Steelers are going to take 30 and 60 whatever. Or no, it'll be less than that because they don't have any real bidders, I guess. But maybe they would. 30 and 62. And let's give them a 138 back, I guess.
Okay. Hey, this one will go
Hey,
on.
PFF likes it. Let's see if it works. Hey, there we go.
I thought maybe it was just like we were having to force them because we controlled all the teams. So it really thinks all these trades are that bad, huh?
Yeah, they're weird with it. So then we're moving up and we're taking Garrett Wilson to try to replace Tyreek Hill. He's obviously not a Tyreek Hill type player, but they want to kind of adjust their offensive, philosophy anyway. So that they want to have a different style of offense, and Garrett Wilson can fit almost any style of offense. So I'm not even that big on Garrett Wilson. I probably have him ranked in the low 20s overall in terms of my big board, but he's the best receiver available, and they desperately need a receiver. So they needed to get up there and get him.
And the Cardinals are devastated because Trent McDuffie and Garrett Wilson just went off the board back to back, and they would have loved to have had either one of those guys. So they're in an interesting position to be on. I mean, they've just got a lot of needs. They'd trade their first round pick for a head coach if they could get one, but they don't have that. So they've only got 2 corners on their entire roster who aren't UDFAs. They lost Chandler Jones and Jordan Phillips in free agency, so their top 2 edge rusher options are a 31-year-old Marcus Golden and a 33-year-old J.J. Watt, who has 10 sacks in the last 3 years combined and has played less than half the games in 4 of his last 6 seasons. They really need wide receiver help. You saw when DeAndre Hopkins got hurt last year, the team fell apart. They lost Christian Kirk to Jacksonville, rightly so. They way overpaid for him. So I think you could see them go any of those directions. You could look at a wide receiver. I think you could look at a cornerback, and I think you could see him look at an edge rusher. Now, the problem is those positions have kind of been picked clean. That you've just seen the last of the big wide receivers go off the board, the last of the big cornerbacks go off the board right before here. And the only top edge rusher left is David Ajabo, who's injured, and this is a team that wants to win now with Kyler Murray before that whole thing blows up because it feels like it has a timer on it.
May I make a suggestion for the Cardinals GM here?
Go for it.
They certainly need to bring in O-linemen who aren't very tall, because Kyler can't see over the offensive line. And there is a center there who is a bit undersized.
That is true. There is a center here. He is a bit undersized. Who is their center right now?
Let me pull it up. I have it right here.
Cardinals depth center Rodney Hudson.
He's
old, that's right.
He's very
that's
old,
right? Yeah, didn't they trade for him from the Raiders last year?
Yeah, I think he's very old. Yeah,
they got him for like a 6th round pick or something like that.
Yeah, and PFF lists center here as a need. So
he is 33 years old. Yeah, that's a tough one. Like Cliff would love a wide receiver because he just stacks wide receivers. There's just not one. And so it comes down to if you're willing to take, to reach for a corner here, if you're willing to reach. I think Tyler Linderbaum would be a great pick here. He's going to be able to slot in right away. He's going to be really good in that type of offense. And so, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and make it official. The Cardinals are going to take Tyler Linderbaum, and they're going to get a good starting center for at least the next decade.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And Dallas is making
that puts the Cowboys on the clock, and this just came in. They're forfeiting their pick because they cheated or something. So it has to go to the Eagles now.
That would be something else. But Dallas, they're making a boring pick here. They need offensive line help. They need to build that offensive line back up to what it once was. And they're going to go to interior O-line, and they're going to take Kenyon Green, offensive guard from Texas A&M, who you can move all over the offensive line if you have to. But I think you can just install him at one of your offensive guard positions, and he'll be a solid starter for a long time to come.
Dang, PFF is a lot lower on Green than I am.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Bills come up on the clock. I would say some of their biggest needs would be like cornerback, defensive tackle, maybe like a right tackle. Low-key, cornerback could be a big concern. You've got Tre'Davious White coming off the torn ACL. Levi Wallace, their CB2, left for Pittsburgh in the offseason. But yeah, I sit here and I look at a guy like Devontae Wyatt who's falling, a guy who is a defensive tackle where you can move him around. I think that the Bills would love Devontae Wyatt. I think they would love his ability to come in and help out in the middle of that defensive line. So that's kind of a no-brainer pick to me, and they're going to take Devontae Wyatt.
Yeah, this is a tough pick for Tennessee here. I think Tennessee would really like to get a wide receiver, but it doesn't really seem like that's in the cards here. So they're going to go best player available. Tennessee really does seem to do that a lot and kind of ignore needs. So they're going to take Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah. It is somewhat of a need for them. They're not rock solid at that position or anything. And Devin Lloyd this is way too low for him to go. But it comes down to that conversation. It's hard to talk yourself into taking a linebacker when there's such other important positions on the board. So I guess we are true Howie Eagles disciples, letting linebackers fall this far. But I'm taking Devin Lloyd at 26.
Yeah, so the Bucks come on the clock, and with Brady returning, the philosophy of this draft just changes. They are back in win now mode, and so you look at their needs. They need offensive guards. They lost both starting guards, Ali Marpet and Alex Kappa, this offseason, and so I think offensive guard. I think they've almost got to make this pick, and Kenyon Green just went off the board, so my next highest rated guy is Zion Johnson. And so I think that's who they've got to pick. Like, they're pretty much penciled into that. There's some other things they could consider, like an edge, maybe a safety, but there's just nobody there. And so Zion Johnson is going to be the pick for the Buccaneers, which puts you back on the clock with the Packers.
and they're happy with how this broke out. They're going to take another wide receiver. They're going to take Jahan Dotson to play in the slot here, and I think Jahan Dotson and Drake London fit really well together. You could play them out there together with whoever you want to put out there as your third receiver. So I think Green Bay revolutionizes their wide receiver position here with 2 picks. So I think they'd be really happy to walk out with London and Dotson. And then I've got the Chiefs up for another pick here, and it's really tough. I'm looking at. I want to get some help for the secondary. So if you could pull up cornerback and safety, so I could walk you through here. It's really tough because I think that they need both. Safety is not listed as a need here, but it does seem like they are going to lose the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. So I think Daxton Hill, who they have listed as a corner, but is really a safety. Same with Petrie, but I think Daxton Hill is a really good option at safety. I think Brisker's a really good option at safety, but I'm going to go and I'm going to take Kaiir Elam out of Florida. A cornerback, really high pedigree, really, really good prospect coming out of high school. And earlier on in this process, this was a guy who was a lock first-round pick, and now it seems like he's a fringe first, maybe high second. And I think that the Chiefs would be happy to walk away with Garrett Wilson and Kaiir Elam.
Got a comment coming in from YouTube, says, I would have wanted London with Sky Moore if I were a Packer fan.
Yeah, I'm much higher on Dotson than Moore. I think Dotson's a really special player, and if he was a couple inches taller, I think he'd be going in the top 15.
That's the thing with Dotson. That's why he is falling, is he's going to be limited to a slot guy. But for a guy like Aaron Rodgers that can, just beautifully execute that quick passing game, having a guy like that in the slot, that's a much bigger weapon than it is for some other guys. So I in that position, I would definitely take Dotson over Moore, although I do get the appeal with Moore and him being able to play on the outside more.
For sure. Oh, and I have Pittsburgh again here. Wow. The Steelers, I forgot because I've traded back so many times. But the Steelers need a safety. So the Steelers are going to look at Daxton Hill, the guy I just mentioned here for Kansas City. I think Daxton Hill, I really do think will go. He's listed as a cornerback. He really will go in this, I would say, 28 to 30 range. If I had to make a real guess on where he'll go, I think KC, I think Green Bay will be interested in him. I think there's a couple of teams at the bottom of this first round and at the top of the second round that'll be really interested in Daxton Hill. So I think he'd be a really good fit here for Pittsburgh. Now, right next to Minkah Fitzpatrick. So they immediately would have a really, really good, combo for Minkah.
All right. So now it has the Bengals up. It lists center and guard as their needs. I feel like that hasn't been updated in a while. They prioritized offensive linemen this offseason, signing Ted Karras from New England, Alex Kappa from Tampa Bay, La'el Collins out of Dallas. So I don't think they're forced into an offensive line pick here. In fact, I think they would love to take a cornerback here.
I think tackle is the offensive line position they need, which is the only one they don't list.
Yeah. And anytime you bring Eli Apple back as a cornerback, you need help in the cornerback room because Eli Apple's a bum. But unfortunately, Kaiir Elam was going to be the pick, and then Daxton Hill was going to be the pick, and they watched those go off the board 1-2 right in front of them. And so that's a devastating thing here. They could look at an edge rusher too, and it would be interesting for a guy like David Ojabo here. Could the Bengals take him? Could they take a guy like Ojabo who, he's going to miss the majority of this season, but you've got the young quarterback, you've got the young weapons. Do you take a flyer on a guy like Ojabo who maybe gets healthy, into that playoff push and could be a really good player long term? At the end of the day, though, I just feel like they're in win now mode because they've got that guy on the rookie deal. I don't think they want to take a swing on that. And so without a good edge rusher option here, without a good option in the secondary they could go with a safety, but that's not really what they need. They need a corner. I'm going to go with Bernard Raymond, the tackle out of Central Michigan. We're just going to continue to build up that offensive line. They did get La'el Collins, but their left tackle, Jonah Williams kind of struggled. La'el Collins, I think, I might be talking myself out of it. I want to go. Williams was pretty good last year, and he was a high round draft selection. What was the Collins deal? How long did he sign for?
I'm not sure who's the other tackle other than Jonah Williams. That's
Lyle Collins.
Oh, I thought he was playing guard. Collins.
I think they've got him playing tackle. He played right tackle for. You know what? I don't know. I'm not doing it. I'm not taking Raymond. Can't go there.
I have seen that mocked a lot. I have seen Raymond mocked there a lot.
Yeah, I guess.
It's funny because they're so limited, and then we get the next pick at 32, where it's like they could literally take like any position.
I know. this one's tough. Like, I guess they could look at a linebacker maybe. I mean, Nakobe Dean is right there. He would make an immediate impact.
What are the top couple picks of the second round? Would anyone want to move up here to 31?
They've got safety. They could take us. They don't need a safety. There's some good safeties, but they've got Von Bell and Jesse Bates. I guess they could take a guy like Petrie and make him the slot, but that doesn't really make sense. They could go for like Boye Mafe as a edge rusher. Yeah, I just don't like how the board falls here. So let's look and see who our future. So the top of the second round, you've got the Jags, the Jets, the Giants, Houston.
Detroit. I guess does Detroit have a pick in there?
Yeah. Of course, Detroit's picking at 30. Detroit picks at 32 and 34, so they're probably not going to try to trade up to 31. So you've got Lions at 32, Jags at 33, Jets at 35, and 38. The Giants.
How about this? I've got an idea.
The Colts at 42. Colts trade up and get a quarterback.
The Pittsburgh Steelers are on the phone.
Oh, I like it. Where are they at?
Let's pull them
52.
Up. Let's give up 52 and 59 to get up here to 31.
Okay.
And they can do that because they picked up an extra second. They still have a second after giving up 2 seconds.
After all of Mark's trade downs.
Yeah, the Steelers. I moved all over the place with the Steelers. Wow. They were my team that I just went crazy with, I guess.
Yeah, I think the Bengals would do that. I just don't think the board falls well here for him, and it's not a problem I anticipated having, but we're going to do that. We're going to trade out of the first round. We're going to put the Steelers up here, and we'll pick up some picks. So your Steelers are on the clock here at 31.
And the Steelers are going to move up, and they're not going to take the QB I would take. So I would take Strong, but I know that the value proposition on that, taking him in the first round, is crazy. So they're going to take a guy who, this is what I actually think happens. I actually think the Steelers are going to take Matt Corral in the first round. It really does seem like they're really linked to him, and Tomlin really likes him. They spent a lot of time with him in his pro day. So I think that there's a good chance they could move back up or trade down a little bit and take Matt Corral. So I think that makes a lot of sense right there.
All right, and then you're on the clock again with the Lions at 32 to finish it out.
So here's where my mind is at. The two players I'd be looking at are really Nakobe Dean and David Ojabo. I think they both make a ton of sense here for Detroit. If you take David Ojabo, obviously you're not trying to compete right now anyway. You're taking a Michigan boy, keeping him in Michigan and Detroit, which their fans will like. You took a safety with the second pick anyway, so you didn't address edge yet. And it doesn't missing him for the year doesn't hurt Detroit, so there's no worries there. But Jacksonville has the 33rd pick, and they just took a defensive end with the first pick. So I don't think they're going to take Ojabo. So I'm going to bank on Ojabo being there at 34 for Detroit if this was a real mock that we were playing out further than this. So I would take Nakobe Dean here at 32. And if Detroit walks away with David Ojabo, Nakobe Dean, and Kyle Hamilton at 3, 32, and 34, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I like Ojabo more than Dean there, but the logic is sound in that, like you said, Jacksonville's probably not taking him, and so they can get him at 34. They would be thrilled. Like you said, it doesn't hurt them at all for him to miss the majority of the year because they're going to stink anyways. Jared Goff's still their quarterback, and in fact, they might kind of want to stink their way into a top quarterback next year. So that wraps up our first round mock draft. We'll just recap it here. At number 1, the Jaguars took Kevon Thibodeau. Number 2, the Lions took Kyle Hamilton. 3, the Texans had Evan Neal. 4, the Jets took Aiden Hutchinson. 5, the Carolina Panthers traded up from 6, gave up a third-round pick next year for Kenny Pickett. Then with back-to-back picks at 6 and 7, the Giants took tackle Akeem Ekwonu and edge George Karlaftis. At 8, the Falcons got Sauce Gardner. 9, the Seahawks, Malik Willis. 10, the Jets took Andrew Booth Jr. At 11, the Commies took Derek Stingley Jr. At 12, the Chargers traded up and took Charles Cross, the tackle out of Mississippi State. At 13, the Texans stopped the slide of Trevon Walker and selected him. 14, the Ravens took Jamison Williams. 15, the Eagles took defensive tackle Jordan Davis. 16, the New Orleans Saints took wide receiver Chris Olave. And then into the back half of the first round, we had 17, the Vikings took Jermaine Johnson. 18, the Eagles took wide receiver Treylon Burks. 19, the Saints took tackle Trevor Penning. 20, the Steelers traded back. The Packers came up and they got Drake London, the wide receiver out of USC. At 21, the New England Patriots stopped the slide of Trent McDuffie, the cornerback out of Washington. At 22, the Chiefs traded up. I believe it was with the Steelers again here, and took wide receiver Garrett Wilson. With the wide receivers off the board at 23, the Cardinals took the center Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa. At 24, the Cowboys took Kenyon Green, the offensive guard out of A&M. At 25, the Bills took Devontae Wyatt. At 26, the Titans took linebacker Devin Lloyd. 27, the Buccaneers took offensive guard Zion Johnson. 28, the Packers took Jahan Dotson. 29, the Chiefs took Khair Elam. At 30, the Steelers took Daxton Hill, the safety. They have him listed as a cornerback out of Michigan. And then they traded back up to 31, and they took Matt Corral, the quarterback out of Mississippi. And then at 32, to round out the first round, the Detroit Lions selected Nakobe Dean, the linebacker out of Georgia. So we get 2 first-round linebackers, 3 first-round quarterbacks in this mock draft.
2 linebackers at 26 and 32. They really snuck in there. But I didn't even realize the Bengals helped the Steelers go get their quarterback in the future in division. I don't know if that would happen, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about the divisional part of that. And I also didn't think about the fact that with the Steelers at 30, if they wanted a quarterback, they'd probably take him there. Try. So, we'll see. But so that is our first official full first round mock draft. We actually stayed on the air here longer than I thought. We kind of flew through the top 10 picks. But initial thoughts about that draft?
Yeah, it kind of lets you know why. The main thing that stuck out to me was the linebackers falling, and some of the other people that fell. It seems like we placed the premium on corner in this draft, so I think that there's a good chance we both have a lot of corners in our top 10 for the Eagles and top 10 to 15 in general. I think that was one of the things that stood out to me, the lack of emphasis we placed on linebacker and the emphasis that we did place on corner. Something else, I guess, when was the first receiver taken? 14?
First receiver came off the board at 14, Jamison Williams. It's
always interesting to see how receiver goes. Some years they get pushed up the board, and then some years they get pushed down the board, and the first one doesn't go until later than you think. I still am shocked that CeeDee Lamb lasted as far as he did. I know that Ruggs and Judy went in that draft, but there's been some receivers that have fallen way far. I mean, Justin Jefferson is a perfect example, but there's been plenty of receivers that have fallen way farther than. I think that everyone is penciling in London and Wilson to the top 10. And I don't know if that's, I think it's more likely than not that one of them does not go top 10.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I'm sure we'll do a couple more of these, get a couple more of these in before the draft. So that is our first shot. I'm going to tweet it out here after we get done. So if you want to see it in a visual form, instead of just hearing us talk about it, I'll have that up on my Twitter account momentarily. So let's see, we got a comment that says Jamison Williams should go that early, but we'll see if he falls. Yeah, people are everywhere. Like these top 5 wide receivers, I feel like you can put them in any order, and you could be right. Like I don't feel like there's a clear consensus here, but that's why I am really excited to see how the wide receivers play out, because generally, I mean, last year Jamar Chase was the far and away number 1. The year before, everybody thought Jerry Jeudy was number 1. Of course, Henry Ruggs went first because the Raiders chased speed. But usually there's kind of a consensus number one at wide receiver, and there just isn't this year. It's all over the place.
Yeah, anyone you look at will have those wide receivers ranked differently. I think most of our positional rankings have been pretty similar when you break them down. And you'll see bigger differences when we get to the big board when you compile all of them together. But for wide receiver, I would say that was the position that me, you, and Dives were the most like opposite on. Each of us had our very own specific and unique ranking on those guys. I know I think it was Williams, London, Olave, Burks, Wilson.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right here. So you went Williams, London, Olave, Burks, Wilson. I went Burks, London, Williams, Olave, Pickens.
And then Dives
was London, Williams, Olave, Burks, Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking that we don't have one guy who's high on Garrett Wilson, I guess, relatively. But
yeah. We all had a different number one, but we all did have Drake London in the top two. So I guess consensus-wise, that's where we are the most we all had Jamison Williams top three.
So yeah, London and Williams are probably our most consensus. Did we all have Olave third?
No, I had Jamison Williams third, Olave fourth.
Okay.
And then I had Pickens 5. So you guys disagreed with me the most on one. I had Treylon Burks as my 1. You and Dibes both had him as 4.
Yeah, I have Pickens as 6. I really like Pickens. He would be right there.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the wide receivers play out. It'll be interesting to see how the whole thing plays out. And we'll be here tracking it all every step of the way. We'll have a cornerback rating show coming up next week where we're going to do our cornerback rankings. And then we'll start getting into big board stuff and some more mock drafts. So, Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts for us today?
No, go Phils. That's my final thoughts.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for episode number 54 of Chalk Talk. If you were here live in the comments, we appreciate you being here. It makes the show more fun for us. If you weren't, tweet at us later. Let us know what you think. I'll post that graphic like I said. But if you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Those really help us out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at _TPL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. _. So for me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.